left to die in the sand. The sky was orange. The twin suns burned above the desert planet called Varnock 6. Sandstorms moved slowly in the distance, and nothing else seemed alive. Then a sound broke the silence. A large alien ship appeared in the sky. It was silver, sharp, and shaped like a bird. It came down fast and landed in the middle of the hot desert. Dust flew everywhere. The door of the ship opened. A tall alien figure stepped out. He was strong, with armor on his body and a golden crown on his head. His skin was pale blue, and his eyes were cold. He was the Baron of Zelvik 9, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Behind him, a small stretcher floated out. On it lay a girl, his daughter. She was not moving. Her name was Sarah. She looked young, maybe 15 in human years. Her body was thin and weak. Her legs did not move. Her arms were quiet. Her eyes were open, but she did not speak. The Baron looked down at her without any emotion. "You were supposed to be strong," he said coldly. "You were supposed to lead our people, but you are broken." Sarah blinked once. That was the only sign she gave that she heard him. "You will die here," the Baron continued, quietly, "like the mistake you are." With that, he turned around and walked back into the ship. The door closed, the engines roared, and in seconds, the ship was gone, leaving behind only the girl and the burning wind. Now Sarah lay alone. The sand was hot. Her skin turned dry. She couldn't move, couldn't cry, couldn't even call for help. The desert was her prison. Hours passed. The sun moved. The wind grew stronger. Sarah's lips cracked. Her eyes stayed open, staring at the sky. But then, something changed. A shadow moved across the sand. Quiet, careful footsteps came closer. Not loud like a soldier's, not smooth like a machine's. They were human. His name was Darren Holt. He was a scavenger, a traveler, and one of the last humans living on this side of the galaxy. He had short dark hair, dust on his face, and a long coat to block the heat. He had seen the ship land from far away. He had followed the smoke trail, thinking maybe he could find supplies or fuel. But instead, he found her. A girl. Lying alone. Not human, not dead. He stepped closer, unsure. "Hello?" he said. No answer. He knelt beside her. Her skin was different, blue and smooth, but her face looked tired, sad, afraid. "Are you alive?" he asked. Sarah blinked. "Can you move?" he asked. No response. Darren looked around. Nothing but sand. No water, no food. No time. He didn't think twice. He picked her up in his arms. She was light like air. He carried her across the desert, step by step, mile by mile, to the place he called home, a small hidden camp made of scrap metal and broken tech. Inside the camp, it was cool and dark. He laid her down on a bed, gave her a few drops of water, cleaned her face, checked for wounds. She watched him silently. Her eyes followed his hands, his tools, his movements. She still didn't speak. Days passed. Every day, Darren tried talking to her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Where are you from? What happened?" No reply. But one night, something strange happened. Darren was checking an old scanner. It picked up strange readings from her. Electrical signals, soft pulses of energy. Not from machines, but from her brain, complex signals. Intelligent ones. She was trying to talk, but without words. That night, Sarah's lips moved. Just one word. "Why?" Darren turned to her, surprised. "Why what?" She took a deep breath. Her voice was weak but clear. "Why? Did you save me?" He sat down beside her and smiled slightly. "Because no one deserves to die alone in the sand, not even aliens." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes, those glowing violet eyes, held a question, a secret, and a little spark of something new. Hope. Darren didn't know her story yet. He didn't know her father had left her to die. He didn't know that this girl, this paralyzed alien girl, held something powerful inside her. But he had a feeling, and the desert wind whispered softly that this was only the beginning. The desert never truly sleeps. At night, it only changes its mask. The heat turns into a strange cold, and the silence becomes heavier. The stars above Varnock 6 shine brighter than on any human world, but there's no one left to admire them except one man. His name was Darren Holt, a human wanderer from a forgotten Earth colony. He lived in the ruins of an old mining outpost, alone with machines that barely worked and memories that never left. He had seen many things across the stars' dead cities, broken planets, wars that made no sense, but nothing quite like the girl he had just rescued. The alien girl lay quietly in the corner of his shelter. Her name he didn't know yet. Her body still didn't move, but her eyes followed everything. That was what kept Darren curious. She was not empty inside. Something lived behind those violet eyes, something smart, something wounded, something powerful. He fixed her a special nutrient mix using his old survival kit. She didn't eat much, but she accepted the drink slowly, bit by bit. Her body was weak, but she was surviving. That alone was a miracle in the desert. Darren talked to her every day, even when she didn't respond. His voice broke the silence. He told her stories about Earth, about the time he fought raiders on a moon called Chorus, about the strange jellyfish creatures on planet Azan. He didn't know if she cared, but he talked anyway. "You know," he said one morning, wiping sweat from his brow, "when I first saw you lying in the sand, I thought maybe you were a trap. Maybe someone left you there to catch fools like me. But now I think maybe you were the one caught." The girl's eyes flicked toward him briefly, then back to the ceiling. Still no words. Still no name. Later that night, as Darren sat fixing a broken sensor, the lights flickered in the shelter. He frowned. The power systems were old, but this was different, almost like interference. He turned to look at the girl. She wasn't moving, but something around her was. A faint blue glow was coming from her fingertips. It was soft, pulsing, and strange, like energy looking for form. "What the hell?" Darren whispered. He grabbed a scanner and pointed it toward her. The readings jumped wildly. Neural activity far more than any human brain. Not just thought. Communication. She was trying to speak, but not with her mouth, with her mind. Darren stepped closer. "You're sending signals, aren't you? But not outward, inward, like your own mind is rebuilding itself." She turned her head toward him, slowly. Her lips parted, and in a voice like quiet wind, she said, "Sarah." It was the first time he heard her name. "Sarah," he repeated softly. "That's your name." She gave the smallest nod. Then her eyes closed, and she rested again. That night, Darren didn't sleep. He sat outside the shelter under the stars, his old plasma rifle across his lap, thinking. This girl Sarah was not just another alien. She was someone important, someone left behind, and someone who still had something left to give. The next morning, Sarah spoke again. Her voice was still weak, but the words came clearer. "He left me," she said. "Who?" Darren asked. "My father, the Baron." Darren's jaw tightened. He had heard of the Baron of Zelviknine, a cold ruler, a powerful alien lord feared across systems. If he had left his own daughter to die, she must have meant nothing to him. Or maybe she meant too much. Why would he do that? Darren asked. "Because I cannot fight. My body is broken." "I am ashamed to him." Darren knelt beside her. "You're not broken. You just need help." "No one helps the weak in my world," she replied. "Only the strong are kept. The rest are disposed." Darren looked at her robotic spine, a sign of failed treatments, and felt anger rise in his chest. This galaxy had become too cruel. It threw away lives like they meant nothing, but not her. Not this time. "Well," Darren said, standing up, "you're not in your world anymore. You're in mine. And we don't leave people behind." Sarah watched him as he walked to the workbench. He began pulling out wires, old parts, and servo motors. She didn't understand at first. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. "Fixing what your father broke," he said with a slight smile. "We're going to build something together. You may not walk today, Sarah, but give it time and you'll run." Outside, the desert wind howled. But inside the small shelter, something had started to change. A new future was taking shape, one made of broken pieces, hope, and human stubbornness. And Sarah, for the first time, felt a reason to live. The days passed like dust through fingers. The desert outside remained silent, deadly, and golden. But inside Darren Holt's shelter, something was growing slowly, quietly, like a flower rising through cracked stone. Sarah was changing Dot at first. It was just her voice, a whisper here, a short sentence there. Each word was heavy, like it had to climb a mountain to escape her lips. But Darren listened to everyone. He never rushed her, never pushed. He just answered her quietly, with calm eyes and steady hands. "I couldn't feel my legs," she said one night, staring at the ceiling made of rusted metal. "I still can't." "I know," Darren replied, without pity. "But you feel something else now, don't you?" She turned her head slowly toward him. "What do you mean?" "Anger, pain, fear, maybe even hope." Sarah didn't reply, but her fingers twitched. The smallest movement, but it was hers. She started asking questions about Earth, about humans, about machines. Darren told her everything. About how humans were not the strongest or fastest or smartest, but they were impossible to kill because they refused to stay down. That was why people called them dangerous. That was why they feared them. Sarah listened carefully, and every night she remembered. Darren began building. He used parts from his old hoverbike, scrap from abandoned outposts, and tech he'd stolen from traders long gone. He designed something simple but powerful, a pair of mechanical legs, linked with a neural interface that would connect to Sarah's spine. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It only had to work. "I've never walked," she said one morning as he adjusted the gears. "Not even as a child." "Then when you take your first step," Darren said, "you'll be stronger than anyone who ever ran." When he placed the frame over her lower body, her face showed no fear, only focus. The link was painful at first, her nerves reacting, brain struggling to connect, but she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She only gritted her teeth and whispered, "Again." It took time, hours, then days. But on the sixth day, Sarah stood shaking, unsteady, but upright. For the first time in her life, her head rose above her body, and she looked around not from a bed, but from her own strength. Darren clapped slowly. "Look at you," he said, "walking like a storm." Sarah didn't smile, but her eyes shined. "This is mine," she said, "not given, earned." She practiced every day. She fell often. The sand was unforgiving even inside the shelter, but she always got back up. There were bruises, burns, and a few broken circuits, but Darren fixed the tech, and she fixed herself as her body grew stronger. So did her voice. One evening, as they sat by a small fire made from dry desert wood, she finally told him her story. "My father," she said, "the Baron, he ruled over many planets. He wanted a perfect heir. A warrior child. But when I was born, I couldn't move, couldn't fight. To him, I was a failure." Darren said nothing. He just listened. He tried to fix me. Cyber doctors, genetic rewrites, memory shaping. None of it worked, so he gave up. Threw me away like trash. She paused, then looked Darren in the eyes. But you didn't. He nodded slowly. Because I don't see trash. I see someone who's still fighting. That night, Sarah stood outside the shelter for the first time. The wind blew across the sand, pushing her back, but she stayed upright. Her new legs hummed quietly beneath her cloak. She raised her hand toward the stars. Do you ever miss your world? She asked. All the time, Darren said behind her. But I've learned to build new things instead of chasing old ones. Sarah closed her eyes and listened to the desert. Then I want to build too, she whispered. And in that moment, something changed inside her. She no longer thought of herself as broken. Her mind was fast, sharp, alive. Her hands could learn. Her body could be rebuilt. And her spirit, once locked in silence, was now screaming to be heard. Darren began training her. Not just to walk, but to think like a human fighter. He showed her how to move silently, how to aim with calm breath, how to feel patterns and energy. She learned quickly. Too quickly. You're not just learning, he said after one session. You're remembering. Sarah looked confused. What do you mean? Your body might have been weak, he said, but your brain, it was built for more. Someone hid it. Maybe even your father. But it's waking up now. That night, Darren reviewed her blood sample under a scanner. The data shocked him. She wasn't just alien. Her DNA had human markers, ancient ones, buried deep. Sarah was part human, but he didn't tell her. Not yet, because something else was coming. He had picked up signals. A ship, military. Baron's crest on the code. They were looking for her. But Darren wasn't afraid, because this time, the girl they left to die in the sand, she could walk, she could fight, and above all, she could speak, and the galaxy would soon hear her voice. The sun rose like fire on the edge of the desert, lighting the broken hills of Varnock 6 in a pale orange glow. Inside the old shelter, metal sparked and gears clicked. It wasn't just a place of survival anymore, it was a workshop, a training ground, and something neither of them dared to say out loud, a home. Sarah stood tall now. Her body still carried its weakness, but it no longer controlled her. The mechanical legs that Darren had built, rough, unpolished, but strong, moved with every command her mind gave. They obeyed not like tools, but like a part of her. Her balance improved. Her movements sharpened. Day by day, she looked less like the abandoned daughter of a cruel baron, and more like a warrior in the making. Darren watched her progress with quiet pride. He had built weapons, fixed starships, even saved lives during the old wars, but this was something else. This was personal. Sarah didn't just survive. She transformed. You're faster today, he said one morning as she leaped over a broken beam in the sand outside the shelter. I didn't fall, she replied, smiling for the first time. Next, we try with weights. Good, I need to get ready. Ready for what? He asked. Sarah turned her head, her face calm but her eyes burning. To go back. To face him. Darren said nothing. He knew she meant the Baron, her father, the one who had left her to die. Like garbage under twin suns. Inside the shelter, Darren had started working on something new. He never told her directly, but Sarah noticed the new pieces, more complex circuits, flexible armor plating, neural boosters. He was designing something special, not just legs, not just movement, a suit, something that would make her not just mobile, but dangerous. He called it the shell. It wasn't pretty. It didn't shine or glow like the armor of royal guards. But it worked. It reacted to her movements, protected her organs, and balanced her speed with strength. The first time she wore it, she almost fell backward. It was heavier than she expected, but she adapted fast. She always did. I don't want to be a machine, she said after testing the suit for hours. I want to be more than that. You're not a machine, Darren said. Machines don't care, you do. That night he gave her a small mirror. She stared at her reflection for a long time. She saw metal on her legs, glowing veins on her arms, wires on her back, but also her eyes, still hers. Still alive. I used to think weakness was something to hide, she whispered. Now. It feels like a beginning, Darren nodded. Pain makes you strong if you survive it. Then I'm almost unstoppable. She trained every day. Darren tested her with weapon-simple blades, small pulse guns, hand-to-hand drills. She struggled at first, especially with aiming. Her body was still learning to trust her mind, but she kept going. Each time she failed, she stood again. Each time she bled. She cleaned the wound and returned. There was something in her now that couldn't be built with machines or circuits. It came from inside, from being thrown away, from being told she was nothing, from being forgotten. That was what made her dangerous. One night, while checking the radar scanner, Darren picked up a new signal. Not just static this time, movement. Clear and sharp. Ship approaching, he told her. Sarah stood beside him, eyes focused. How far? About 20 miles. Small patrol. Same signature as your father's fleet. They found me. Darren checked his old rifle. It still worked. Barely. We can hide, he said. Or we can run. Sarah shook her head. No. Not this time. He looked at her. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't shaking. She was ready. You sure? He asked. I want them to see me. To see what they left behind. Darren smirked. Then let's clean the guns. By sunrise, they were prepared. Traps hidden in the sand. High ground mapped. Power cells charged. Sarah wore the full shell suit for the first time in live combat prep. She looked taller, stronger, not human, not alien. Something new died as the ship landed in the distance. Kicking up dust, Sarah looked toward it without blinking. This is the E. First test, she said. Not of the suit. Of me. Darren placed a hand on her shoulder. Then give them something they'll never forget. The ship door opened. Armed soldiers stepped out, sleek armor, polished weapons. Ready for orders? They expected a broken girl. Instead, they saw a figure wrapped in metal, standing alone in the desert wind, glowing eyes fixed on them like a storm held in flesh. And, as the heat shimmered between them, Sarah took her first step forward, not just with machine legs, but with something more powerful, a human heart. The warning came too late. By the time Darren's radar picked up the incoming ship, the sand outside was already rumbling. A sleek black cruiser sliced through the sky, its engines glowing with red flame. It bore the seal of House Zelvik, the Baron's mark. The man who had abandoned his daughter had finally noticed she was alive. Inside the shelter, Darren checked his weapon systems. Most were outdated. His plasma rifle needed recharging, and the landmines he had buried in the dunes were unreliable. At best, but it didn't matter. He wasn't planning to win a war just to buy time. Sarah stood beside him, calm and silent. She had heard the engines, too. Her eyes were sharp, focused. Her armor shimmered with soft energy as she adjusted the shoulder plates. They're here for me, she said. Darren didn't argue. They think you're still the same girl they threw away. Then they're already defeated. The ship landed with a heavy blast of wind and dust. The ramp dropped, and out came a team of armored soldiers, 6 of them, each one trained, armed, and moving like they had done this before. Their leader stepped forward, a tall alien with gray skin and a voice like metal scraping bone. We are here for the Baron's property, he said. Stand aside, human. Darren raised his rifle, but Sarah placed a hand on his arm. No, she said softly. Let them see. She stepped forward, the desert wind lifting her dark cloak, revealing the full bodysuit Darren had built and she had improved. Her legs hummed with quiet power. Her hands were bare, open not to surrender, but to show she didn't need to hide. Soldiers hesitated. This unit is considered defective, the commander said. Orders are to take her alive or end her. Sarah's voice didn't rise. She didn't scream or threaten, then choose. They chose violence. The first soldier moved fast, aiming a stun rifle. But Sarah moved faster, her body twisted with perfect control. She dropped low, slid under the shot, and knocked the weapon out of his hands with a spinning kick that sent him crashing to the sand. Darren fired from behind, keeping the others back as Sarah engaged the second and third soldier. Her movements were smooth and brutal, part machine, part instinct, all heart. She didn't hesitate. She didn't falter. She fought like someone who had waited her entire life for this moment. Within minutes, 3 soldiers were down. 1 retreated toward the ship. The commander growled and charged her directly with an electrified blade. Your father should have ended you himself, he shouted. Sarah caught the blade between her mechanical arms, sparks flying across her face. She looked him in the eyes and said, That's why he failed. She disarmed him with a twist of her body and knocked him unconscious with a powerful elbow strike. The last soldier dropped his weapon and raised his hands in surrender. Darren stepped out, covering him with his rifle. Run, he told the soldier. Tell your Baron she's not property anymore. The man didn't wait. He stumbled into the ship and took off, leaving the desert cracked and silent once more. Sarah stood in the wreckage of the fight, her chest rising and falling. She was bleeding from a cut above her eyebrow. Her right leg joint sparked again. But she was smiling just a little. That wasn't just survival, she said. That was a message. Darren walked up beside her. You think he got it? She looked to the sky. He will. Inside the shelter, they patched up wounds. Darren replaced the damaged wiring in her leg while Sarah cleaned her armor. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Later, while Darren checked the remains of the enemy ship, Sarah sat quietly in the corner of the camp, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She thought about what the commander had said. Defective, property, orders to kill. That was who she had been. Not anymore. She wasn't a weapon. She wasn't a mistake. She was proof that something left behind could become something powerful. That night, as they sat beside a small fire, Darren handed her a data pad. On it were the files he had recovered from the patrol ship, prisoner codes, location maps, hidden logs. Among them were names. Others like her experiments, abandoned. Silence. Her hands tightened around the pad. I'm not the only one, she whispered. Darren nodded. And they might not be as lucky as you. Sarah stood. Her shadow danced on the rocks behind her. The desert had been her grave once. Now it was her forge. Then I won't just fight for me, she said. I'll fight for them. Darren smiled. That's a very human thing to say. She looked at him not with thanks, but with shared understanding. The kind of bond made in fire and pain, between 2 people who never gave up. Sarah walked out into the night, her steps quiet but sure. Somewhere across the stars, her father was preparing for war, but so was she. And this time, she wasn't alone. The desert shook with the sound of war. The patrol ship burned in the sand, black smoke rising into the bright morning sky. The soldiers who came to take Sarah were no longer standing. They were broken, scattered, or fleeing. The wind carried the smell of heat and metal, and the silence afterward was louder than the battle itself. Sarah stood at the center of it all. Her armor was cracked in places. Sparks blinked on her left leg where a shot had damaged the wiring. Her breath came slow, controlled. Her face was calm, not from peace, but from purpose. She had fought. And she had won. Darren limped out from behind the rocks where he'd taken cover during the final wave. Blood stained the side of his shirt, but he was still standing. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low but proud. Sarah didn't answer at first. She stared down at one of the soldiers still alive, groaning, trying to reach for a dropped weapon. She stepped forward and placed her foot on the gun, pushing it deeper into the sand. "I gave them a chance to leave," she said. "I know," Darren replied. "They made their choice." They brought the injured soldier inside the shelter. Sarah didn't hate him. She didn't scream. She only asked one question. "Did he send you himself?" The soldier looked at her through a cracked helmet. He doesn't even know you're alive. He thought you'd be gone in days." Sarah nodded once, slow and cold. "Then it's time he learns the truth." She connected a small data spike to the soldier's comlink. A single transmission was prepared short, encrypted, and marked with the Baron's own family seal. One line of text, "I survived." She sent it. Then, quietly, she began preparing for more dot in the wreckage of the enemy ship. Sarah found pieces she could use: advanced energy cells, reinforced plating, a neural stabilizer. She didn't hesitate. She removed her armor and began replacing parts, making them better, faster. She was not just wearing a machine, now she was becoming part of it. Darren watched in silence, seated on a metal crate, wrapping his wound. She moved like someone who had done this before someone, trained not just to wear technology, but to command it. And still he wondered. "Sarah," he said, "do you remember anything?" "Before the desert?" She paused. A flash of something moved behind her eyes. Not fear, not pain. "A memory. Rooms filled with white light," she said quietly. "Cold voices. My father watching through glass. I was tested, cut, rebuilt. Again. And again, I wasn't his daughter. I was his experiment." Darren's jaw clenched. He had seen cruelty before, but this was deeper. A kind of cruelty that didn't scream, it whispered. It smiled while it destroyed. "He wanted to build the perfect warrior," Sarah continued, "but I wouldn't break the way he wanted. So he threw me away." She stood up, fully armored. Now, the improvements made her look even more inhuman, taller, sharper, glowing with cold blue light. But Darren didn't see a machine. He saw her eyes, and her eyes were human. "Then let's give him something he never expected," Darren said. "Let's show him what his failure became." That night, Sarah worked in silence. She used the enemy ship's transmitter to scan deeper across systems. What she found made her freeze. Coordinates. A list of children hybrids, experiments, all marked with codes. Most were labeled terminated, but a few had another tag, active. "They're like me," she whispered. "Others he didn't kill." Not yet. Darren leaned over the console. "He's keeping them? Why?" "To control them, to use them, maybe even to sell them." Sarah's hands tightened into fists. "We have to stop him." "Then we need allies," Darren said. "You send that message, others will hear it. Others who hate him too." Sarah opened a channel. Not to her father, but to the galaxy. Her voice, strong and clear, echoed into space. "My name is Sarah. I was left to die. I was called a failure. But I survived, and I remember. To anyone who was broken, who was forgotten, who was used, we are not alone. We are not weak. I am coming, and I'm not afraid anymore." She sent the broadcast. A storm was rising. Over the next few days, responses trickled, encoded messages, hidden signals, survivors from planets ruled by the Baron. Some were human, some alien. All were angry. All were waiting for someone to. Led and Sarah had become that someone. She stood once again at the edge of the shelter, looking across the open desert. Darren stood beside her, bruised, tired, but alive. You still want to go back? He asked. Yes, she said, but not to beg. Not to ask why. Then why? To finish what he started. Darren nodded. Then let's build a ship. Sarah smiled, not soft but sharp, like a blade that finally knows its purpose. Behind her were scars, memories, and the silence of the sand, but ahead was war. The ship rose from the sands like a ghost reborn. Darren had called it a miracle. It was built from the wreckage of a patrol craft mixed with salvage tech, solar sails, and stubborn human engineering. Sarah called it something else, freedom. It was rough. It groaned when it moved. But it could fly, and for the first time in her life, she was no longer trapped to the ground. They named the ship Ashwind, for the place that had tried to kill her, and the fire she had become. The stars opened before them. Their destination was clear. Zelvik 9, the Baron's fortress world, where gold towers rose above cold cities and silence ruled like a god. It was a place Sarah had not seen since she was a child. But now she was returning not as a daughter, not as an outcast, but as a weapon he could never control. In the days that followed her broadcast, more voices had joined her cause. Across forgotten colonies and silent moons, others had heard Sarah's message. Not all were soldiers. Many were broken like she had been, but they remembered. And they believed. One ship became 4, then 10. A fleet was forming, not of polished armies, but of survivors. Darren stood by her side in the Ashwind's control room. He looked at the coordinates blinking on the map. We have one shot at this, he said. They'll see us coming. Sarah nodded. Her armor was upgraded, now sleeker, stronger, powered by a hybrid core. Her body still bore the scars of the desert, but her spirit, it was forged in fire. We're not going to sneak in, she said. We're going to walk through the front door. When they arrived in the Zelvik system, the Baron's ships responded immediately, dozens of them, dark and silent like metal beasts. They circled the planet, guarding it from every side. But Sarah didn't flinch. She opened her comms and spoke one sentence into the open channel. Baron, your daughter has come home. A pause. Then the reply came, his voice, cold, sharp, like glass breaking in the dark. You were dead. I lived. You are nothing. Then why are you afraid? The first battle began in orbit. Darren led the fleet with calm precision, dodging plasma blasts and countering with hacked drones. Sarah moved through space like a storm, her suit allowing her to jump from ship to ship, disabling systems, tearing through steel, fighting like no one the Baron had ever seen. She wasn't just strong. She was human strong, unpredictable, relentless, refusing to fall. When they reached the surface, Sarah led the march through the city. People watched from windows, aliens, hybrids, servants who had long forgotten hope. Now they saw her, and something inside them woke up. One by one, they began to follow. They reached the palace gates at dusk. The sky burned red behind her. Baron stood at the top of the stairs, guarded by elites in golden armor. He looked down at Sarah like she was still the little broken thing he had abandoned. You are still weak, he said. Sarah took a step forward. Then why do you shake when I speak? He raised his hand. The guards attacked, but they didn't last long. Sarah fought with purpose. She didn't kill unless forced. She moved fast, efficient, graceful, a blur of metal and fire. Darren covered her from behind, his aim perfect. When the last guard fell, Sarah walked the final steps alone. Father and daughter now stood face to face. You could have ruled beside me, he said bitterly. I was never your heir, she answered. I was your creation, but I became more. He reached for his weapon, a hidden blade made of pure plasma. Sarah didn't step back. You think being born strong makes you powerful, she said, voice calm. But strength means nothing when you feel nothing. He charged. She dodged. The fight was fast, brutal. But the Baron was aging, and Sarah was something he had never understood, someone who had earned every piece of her strength. She didn't win through power. She won through will. When he fell, gasping, defeated on the palace floor, she didn't finish him. She looked him in the eye one last time. "You left me to die," she said. "But I found life in the desert. I found my heart in a human's kindness. And now I found my voice." She turned away. Let him live in his silence. The city gates opened. The people welcomed her not with cheers, but with quiet respect. They had seen what she was, what she had become, not a queen, not a killer, a leader. Later, standing beside Darren on the palace balcony, she looked out at the stars. "What now?" he asked. She smiled. "Now we find the others, the forgotten ones. We bring them back. We teach them to stand." And far across the stars, broken voices began to rise, because Sarah had walked through the fire, crossed the sand, faced death, and chose to fight not with hate, but with hope. She was not just an alien. She was not just a survivor. She was the one thing her father never planned for. She was human where it mattered most.